Welcome to Brain Health Matters, a series of books, courses, and programs just like this, all created to help you become healthier so your brain can be happier and stronger. This week, what is the connection between mental health and nutrition, and where does junk food fit in?
Brain Health Matters is brought to you by Don't Let the Memories Fade. Learn many enjoyable ways to enhance body, mind, and spirit with simple lifestyle changes that will help you improve your memory and your mind. You can create a healthier, more vibrant future with Don't Let the Memories Fade. Available in ebook and paperback on Amazon everywhere.
Hello and welcome to Brain Health Matters. I'm your host, Kate Kunkel, and this week our guest is Dr. Bonnie J. Kaplan. She is a professor emerita in the Cumming School of Medicine at the University of Calgary in Alberta, Canada. Dr. Kaplan's interest in the biological basis of behavior led to postdoctoral training and then faculty research in neurophysiology. We'll have to ask her about that. She has published widely on the biological basis of developmental disorders and mental health, especially the contribution of nutrition to brain development and brain function. She has a book called The Better Brain, and we're going to be covering quite a bit about the topic in there. That's also why I've invited Dr. Kaplan to share with us how we can create better brains with food. Welcome, Dr. Kaplan.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Kate. It's a pleasure to talk to an audience such as yours.
Thank you. Yes, we are a group of people who are very concerned about our brains, and any way we can make them better, that's what it's all about. So I've read a lot of your materials, but I love the subtitle of your book, Overcome Anxiety, Combat Depression, and Reduce ADHD and Stress with Nutrition. It almost seems too good to be true. And I know some people who will object, saying it is impossible to deal with these forms of mental illness with nutrition. What say you to people who think that psychiatric medications are actually the answer?
I think that psychiatric medications have been disappointing. I mean, anybody who looks at the prevalence rate of mental illness, which has gone up over the last 50 years, has gone up from roughly, for point prevalence, roughly 1% to 20%. And that has coincided exactly with the psychopharmacology revolution, which we thought would solve our problems. So it's, I don't think, too negative to say it just hasn't solved the problems. But there's no question some people benefit from them. My position, and it is in my vision of the future, if you've gotten chapter 12 of the book, is that medications will be out there, but they will never be introduced as the first line treatment, because there is so much more that we can do. And first of all, we can build cell walls, and we can improve cell metabolism with nutrition. And then we can also do deep breathing exercises and yoga and meditation and work and social support and all these other things. Exercise, did I say that? All of those things, which we also know are very useful for improving brain health. And only if a person has not really resolved their problem, I think medication should be the supplement. That's why I tend not to call nutrients a supplement. We talk about nutrients as supplements, but from the point of view of mental health, I don't think they are. I think medication should be the supplement.
That brings me to a question I did want to ask you, and we'll come back to the food part and all those other wonderful things you suggested, because I talk about those too. But supplements, and that is something people talk a lot about when it comes to nutrition. People often equate their nutrition with taking supplements. What do you think about that?
I think that the first line of nutritional treatment is to feed our brain the way we are supposed to be feeding our brain. And that means in whole foods. Even though my own research focused on broad spectrum micronutrients in pill form, there are reasons why I was doing that. And that's, in the book. But I'm absolutely, and my co-author is too, we're food first people. We need to improve the soil to have healthier crops. We need to absolutely get people to eat, to make better selections. May I throw a couple numbers at you?
Oh, please do. Please do.
Okay, so this is really shocking. We've evolved to need food, and we've evolved to need it often. That's why, I used to think it would be nice if I could just eat one meal a year because I wasn't into cooking, but it's not enough. We have to eat often during the day, constantly feeding our brain. And so you have to ask, are we getting what our brains need? And the choices that our population is making they're frightening. So all of food can be seen as being on a continuum, from whole, real food, and we all know what that is. It's mostly in the produce section, but also meat section, whole, real, organically grown meat. And then all the way over to the ultra processed, industrialized chemicals, which are not food at all. I don't like to call them ultra processed food because food is what we need to build and sustain ourselves. And there is nothing in those ultra processed chemical products which are feeding your brain, feeding your cells, sustaining your brain metabolism, nothing. So if you look at that continuum, according to the latest American data, and we also have it from Canada and the UK, more than 50% of the caloric intake that we are putting into our bodies now is from the ultra processed chemical products. And for children under the age of 19, it's 67%. 2/3, in other words, I think of this as a huge population experiment with grim results, as we're seeing, which is that we are selectively excluding 2/3 of the nutrients that our brains need every single day if we're below the age of 19, and 57% if we're adults. Isn't that shocking?
I truly believe that's why so many children, firstly, are obese. I was the only fat kid in my class when I was a kid. I admit I was a fat kid. But I was the only one in my class and for several classes. And I truly believe now it's very different. From what I can see from the class photos that I see now, it's very different. Children are very heavy. And I just read somewhere that almost like every classroom will have one or two children where there's an EpiPen in the nurse's office because the children also have allergies. That's quite frightening, and that has to be from diet, perhaps also from chemical exposures on the
Right.
planet. But
right, it's very complicated. But the fact is that we have a very unhealthy generation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of worried about them. I have three grandchildren, and yeah, their diet is not what Alma would feed them if she had an opportunity. But they are eating what most children do, and it's kind of sad to see because what that sets them up, and that's where I'd like to take this with you. From a mental health standpoint, one of the things in your subtitle there is ADHD. So many children are diagnosed with this. How easy would it be to turn that around with diet?
We could definitely turn it around. And now I'm wearing a scientific hat, and I can tell you there is now so much scientific data showing improvement in children with ADHD who are put on additional micronutrients. There are none that look at whole of diet yet, but that'll come. And anyway, so much research. 3 clinical trials from New Zealand, the US, and Canada, replicating exactly, showing such dramatic improvement that it is, in my opinion, immoral, if not unethical, to begin treatment of ADHD with the medication. It's just not, but the doctors don't know, because where do they get their medical education from? Where does the public get their education from? The media will not cover any of I'm talking about broadly those of us who study nutrition and mental health. They will not cover any of our studies in the media. It's like it's all blacklisted if it's vitamins and minerals, unless it's a single magic bullet. And then it's kind of neat and trendy to study, omega-3s or vitamin D is going to fix depression. Well, that's so much baloney, and that's where our tax money goes. That's where the media covers the negative results, because they love negative results with vitamins and minerals. So that's why we wrote the book, Kate, because we thought it's written for the general public. It is not written for our fellow scientists or physicians, because we thought if we can wake up the general public, then they will go and demand that our mental health treatment system change to incorporate a nutrition first approach.
Oh, I so hope you meet your goal. That's what I was doing with Don't Let the Memories Fade too, because we are also told that dementia cannot be treated. We hear that all the time. Just get your affairs in order, go and wait until you're in diapers, and then we'll talk to you again. And that seems to be the standard course of treatment. I saw that with my mom. And I truly believe that mental illness, ADHD, depression, dementia, all of them should be treated first with nutrition, because we know, like Dr. Bredesen, I'm a student of Dr.
You know
Bredesen,
this one. Yes.
he's had amazing results, but the media doesn't cover. And I just saw a lady from California, a professor from a university in California, basically saying it's nonsense. He's not shown any proof that it helps.
You know what that usually means? It means they haven't looked at it. No one has put the article in front of them. And you have to understand, it's changed so much in my lifetime, Kate. No human being can keep on top of all of the medical and scientific literature relevant even to their fairly narrow focus. It's very, very hard to do. So when someone says there's no evidence, it means they haven't seen the evidence yet when it comes to nutrition and brain health. I mean, there's research in our book about even before Bredesen's work, Martha Claire Morris's longitudinal research on dementia and diet. And also, I always cite the VitaCog trial. Do you know that one?
No, I don't.
Well, I think this is brilliant and it should get lots more attention. It was done at Oxford University in the UK. And it's in our book. I should tag the page so I could read you the numbers, but I'll just give you the general overview. They took a group of people who already had been diagnosed with what you might call stage 1 dementia, mild cognitive impairment. And so they knew the progression that these people were headed for, and they were randomized to either get a high dose B complex or a placebo on top of all their regular care. So they didn't give a broad spectrum. They didn't change the diet. They really targeted B complex at relatively high doses. And the reason is, amongst the other nutrients that we know, roughly 30 or more that are important for the brain, B vitamins are really, really important. There's a whole literature on B complex and stress. Anyway, in 2 years, the people who, after they broke the blind, right, they found the people who had taken the real thing had less cognitive progression, decline, than those who got placebo. But in addition, they did brain scans. And if you're over 30, you're losing brain cells. So we are both losing brain cells. We know it, okay? But these people, the ones who were taking the B complex, had a fraction of the cellular loss that the people on placebo did. It's called brain atrophy, and they can measure that in brain scans. That is a very important study, I think. And I do think anyone who's concerned about their brain health, at the very least, they should be taking a B complex after breakfast every morning. And the reason I say after breakfast is because you should take it with food. And because some people, if they take vitamin B, a number of the vitamin Bs too late in the day, it's a little energizing and they have trouble going to sleep. You know that.
Other vitamins, they will give you figures like if you take omega-3, you have a 60% less chance. Or if you take B12, you have a 30% less chance. My husband made this big joke. He said, well, you take omega-3 and you take B12 and you take C and you take D3, you should be in the minus. You should have no chance. You should be progressing. And that's, I think, where we get this idea that if we take omega-3, that's going to solve a big bunch of our problem. And whatever else we do doesn't really matter because we're taking this now because it was in that article.
That's because the articles, by and large, have a magic bullet thinking approach. And we talk about magic bullet thinking in our book. It has been a huge obstacle for those of us who are trying to study nutrient supplementation the way our brains need nutrients, which is the whole spectrum and in balance. And so, it's much easier to just get a grant to say, oh, I'm going to see a vitamin. We know that people who get depressed have lower levels of vitamin D. Let's do a study to see if we can fix depression by giving more vitamin D. Well, that is such a leap of logic, and it shows a belief system which is not based on human physiology. So, and to be very honest, I don't say this very often, but a major reason that I wanted to write this book is chapter 2. We describe how the nutrients work together in just a single picture. I don't know if you caught that. People who get the Kindle version don't get, or I guess one of those, they don't get to see the picture. And I urge you to go look at that picture, because once you see how all the nutrients are needed every minute of every day across, and that's roughly 15 vitamins and 15 minerals, and that's only for the active metabolic steps. Plus, you want cell structure to be intact, and that's dependent on the omega-3s and the other essential fatty acids. I mean, then you cannot think about magic bullets. There isn't one.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear you say that, because people will ask me, I will get a new client and they'll say, well, I hear that this will work or this will work. How much should I take? And I'm like, well, first let's get your diet in order. Then we'll talk about the rest of it, because all of those things also need the macronutrients, our food, for those micronutrients to work, right?
Right. Absolutely. They all go together.
Exactly. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the state of the world today in terms of mental health. We see it on news items in the major media and online about people going a little bit berserk for no apparent reason. Like there'll be fights on airplanes and in lineups and so forth. And honestly, I'm 65. I don't remember hearing about or seeing things like that in the past. Could that have something to do with our brains? And if so, what would make this kind of aggressive behavior so common these days?
There's nothing more complex than human behavior. And the complexity of the human brain is enormous. And so I wouldn't want anyone to think that because I'm talking about the role of nutrition, I think it's the only variable. But we have really good evidence that a lot of that irritability and explosive rage is in fact due to suboptimal nutrition in brain metabolic pathways. And we have it, in fact, in the book, I tell the story of how I first got interested in a broad spectrum kind of approach back in 1996, so 25 years ago. And in that time, from first seeing individual cases and then publishing open label case series and within subject crossovers, people going on off of supplements and seeing how you can turn symptoms on and off, and now randomized controlled trials, the whole gamut of methodology. The set of symptoms that every single scientist has reported on is people who, and it's not everybody, but people who benefit clinically from the additional nutrients. The set of symptoms that is the most commonly improved is transdiagnostic. It's not just in ADHD, it's not just in depression, but it is irritability and explosive rage. It is that we call it mood regulation, okay? And so people who have any kind of degree of mood dysregulation really should look at their nutrient intake. It's the easiest thing to treat, actually. I mean, we have dramatic cases of wild 4-hour temper tantrums in children just dissipating, turning around. In some cases, we tell the story of Liam in the book that is not published, but it was literally overnight there was an effect. And it should be. If you're dealing with vitamins and minerals, the effect should be almost immediate, maybe not the first day, but within a few days up to a week or two, because it's what's dynamically perfusing your brain at all times, that blood flow, changing the availability of micronutrients. Omega-3 fatty acids, if you're studying that's a different thing. You're talking about structural impact of omega-3 fatty acids, and that can take much longer to see an impact. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. The fact that it happens so fast should be encouraging to parents who may be dealing with children with temper tantrums, and to know that if you can try these nutrients to see if that alleviates it. Then you can at least say, okay, we know where the problem is. Now we've got a course of action that we don't have to just feel that we're going to be drugging this poor child.
Yeah. It really is empowering. We think our message is very empowering. And one of the funny things that I've seen happen, now this is anecdotal, but I've seen it happen quite a few times. People write to me all kinds of stories, and they'll say, I took one of those micronutrient formulas and I didn't think it would affect me, but it really helped me regulate my mood. I felt calm or whatever. And that's what motivated me to change my diet. Now, as I said, I'm a diet first person, but if people just are really lazy or stuck in a rut, it's very hard to change habits, right? And we all develop a habitual way of eating. And sometimes having a dramatic effect with nutrients in pill form motivates people to say, oh, I guess I am affected. I guess it matters. I better change the way I eat.
Well, see, and whatever it takes, right? That's kind of my feeling, whatever it takes to get people to do it. Now, we talked about the junk food. Obviously, we know that all this ultra processed, and I'm a vegan, and I espouse a vegan diet for most people that I deal with, not everybody. But we also have the power of the kind of fruits and vegetables. So when I say that, I mean like organic versus not organic. Do you think that that can make a big difference for the brain as well?
So when you get to produce, organic versus not, when we actually have a little bit of unpublished data to suggest that you cannot count on organic fruits and vegetables to have more nutrient density. I mean, I do think that people who are organic farmers, those are the food producers who are better stewards of the soil, but they can't completely tame the glyphosate that comes blowing over the fence from the next field, which is not organic, etc. So, and it's, of course, it's also very expensive to eat purely organically, at least here it is. So I suggest to people that if they want to reduce their exposure to toxins and increase the probability they're getting better nutrient density, that they try to eat some of their food from the organic aisle. I mean, I can tell you practically the way I do it for my family is if I'm not at a farmer's market, which I try to do, but I'm going to a general grocery store, I go directly to the organic aisle first. And I try to buy the things that I would use from there. And then I fill in from the non-organic, or at least try to buy one or two things from the organic section with every visit to support the effort to improve organic farming and to bring income to those folks.
I asked about this because I'm very aware of the cost of organic and how difficult it is for the poor organic farmers to even separate. I mean, the glyphosate is water soluble. It goes into the air, it comes down as rain, and it rains on, crops that are organic. So I don't know that we can say anything is truly organic. But there are things like strawberries and spinach and kale that are so heavily sprayed that I suggest to people, if you have a limited budget, that's where you want to spend it, on those things that are mercilessly sprayed. They are really, and apples, things like that.
I was just going to add that the Environmental Working Group puts out its list of dirty dozen every year. So you can just look at ewg.org.
Yeah. So let's talk about junk food, because we've sort of covered the good stuff, but what is it besides the fact that it doesn't have that much nutrient? Do you think the processing itself, the actual, what happens to the food-like substances as they go down the line, is that what actually causes problems, or is it just that our body can't use it so well, so it's starved of nutrients?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There's very little data to show that the problems with mental health are related to the chemicals in the food. There's the old literature from the 1970s and 80s, and I actually did some of the research on it. I did a randomized controlled trial showing the artificial colors, flavors, etc., were a problem for children with hyperactive, as we call it then, hyperactive behavior. But since then, there's not a lot of work because there's so many, there are 70,000 chemicals out there all the time. And the only research that's done in animals is on cancer as an outcome, not brain health usually. So I think the way to look at it is with every bite we take, we are choosing to feed our brains or not. And if it's an ultra processed product, then you might as well be eating the cardboard box that the stuff came in, because then at least you'll get some fiber, but you're not feeding your brain. You really are not. And here's the way you know it. You will see, if you look at the ingredient list, you'll see lots of fats, mostly saturated. You'll see tons of carbs. You'll see too much sodium usually. And what did I leave out? Maybe a little protein, depending on, what it is.
Hydrolyzed soy protein.
Exactly, there's that. So, and those are the major ingredients. And then you look for vitamins and minerals. Well, they're only required to give the percent daily value of, it varies by country, but 3 or 4 or 5, mostly minerals, not even vitamins. And they'll proudly announce it gives you 10% of the daily value of, say, iron. Well, iron deficiency is a huge problem worldwide, and you're not going to get it by eating 10% of the daily value from your cookies or whatever, because the daily value is of trivial significance. It's nowhere near what our brains need. Daily value is not based on brain health. It's based on what healthy people need to keep what healthy soldiers after World War II needed to continue fighting and marching.
Yeah, that's not exactly optimal health. That's just functional. That's really all that is.
That's right. So anyway, just with every bite you eat, choose to eat a whole food, and gradually your ultra processed products will decrease, and your taste buds will change as you get used to things that are not loaded with sugar.
Yeah, sugar. I was going to ask you about sugar.
I remember the day when I saw, oh, isn't this interesting? Lots more frozen meat products for people, and they're sort of more ready to eat, etc. And I started reading the ingredients, and I kept seeing sugar. I thought, sugar? What are people doing putting sugar on meat? And if you read any of the books on what agribusiness has done to our food products, you'll see Michael Moss's book called Hooked is one that I've been reading recently. And it's as if the agribusiness, they figured out how to get people hooked on the obvious candy foods, like the so-called breakfast cereals, which are mostly sugar. And then it's as if they went aisle by aisle through the grocery store and said, where else can we add sugar to get people dependent? And eventually got around to meat. And I still am shocked at that.
So what does sugar do to the brain? Because it seems like it's very addictive. Is it because it attaches, is it some kind of a hormone that it affects or neurotransmitter that it affects? Because when people are hooked on it, because that's the first thing I ask my clients to get rid of. I ask them, please, to get rid of the sugar, because we can't really get to much else unless we're out of that. But what is it about the sugar that is so hard for people to let go of?
We have known from animal studies for 50 years how addictive sugar is. Lab animals will choose sugared water over, anything else. There's something very addictive. Now, I'm just reading Diabolical also by Rob Lustig. If you want to understand the endocrinological basis of that, I recommend that book or anything by Rob Lustig. It's Lustig, because that's the message he's trying to get across. But let me turn this around and ask you a question. What percentage of the people who you work with and you tell to get rid of sugar, what percentage of them are unable to do it?
At least 50%.
Right.
Yeah, it's really, really hard for people to dump it. And it's only if they can get rid of it even if I can get them off it for a week or two, and they start seeing that they can think more clearly, then sometimes they will continue. But yes, it's at least half just can't do it.
That's what I've heard too. I've spoken to the Kick Sugar Summit and the Quit Sugar Summit, both of them. And they all say it's just a higher percentage. We need more scientists interested in this, because I have anecdotal information, and I stress this is only anecdotal, that people who replace their sugar with nutrients by increasing their getting their sugar from apples instead of pastries, etc., or add micronutrients in pill form, they soften the withdrawal. They don't go through the withdrawal, which is what knocks everybody off the wagon. They just fall off.
It's like getting rid of alcohol. People who are alcoholic, it's the withdrawal period. And maybe it's part of the sugar too, because it does create sugar, right? So that might be part of it. But yeah, that withdrawal period. And I think when I think about, when you ask me that question, I'm thinking, okay, the people that had the most success are also the ones who were willing to put more veggies on their plates, and they really did it. People who were, determined to do this because maybe their mom had just passed from dementia or something, and they have an extra driver. But yeah, it is a really difficult thing. So it actually, from what it does to the brain, does it change something in the brain, or is it just the whole system that's affected?
Oh, I think it's the whole system. The whole syndrome of metabolic pre-diabetes and so forth. That there are even some studies out now showing brain changes during that period. But I don't think I can summarize them easily for you. I can just say that, yes, you're onto something very important. But what strikes me, sorry, I'm just going to bring it back to what I'm interested in. I hear people going through withdrawal from many different things say it's that if they can take broad spectrum micronutrients, the withdrawal is softened. And so the broad spectrum formulas that are the most studied in the world they're both Canadian companies. They're the ones that Julia and I have studied. Julia's in New Zealand. So they've been studied in New Zealand, in the US, and in Canada. There are over 40 studies showing improved mental health in all of these areas involving mood regulation. And there is one, and it was Julia Ruckledge's study on withdrawal symptoms. And she had a student who was interested in seeing if she could improve people trying to get off of nicotine by giving them broad spectrum micronutrients. And it was very hard to study, because when you're studying smokers, the dropout rate is phenomenal, right? It's really addictive, and it's very hard. But they showed very clearly, and I can send you that article if you like, that adding broad spectrum micronutrients softened the withdrawal symptoms and improved the success rate. And the people who study this in people with psychiatric medications are reporting the same thing, but it's just clinical and anecdotal so far. We need another scientific study. People going through withdrawal, getting off of psychiatric meds, can do it if they are given broad spectrum micronutrients and do a cross titration, etc. And so then back to sugar. I really want someone to study it in sugar. I'm so sorry. I'm retired. I can't do that myself.
Any thoughts on genetically modified organisms in terms of their value, I guess, as nutrition? Is there any difference?
It is too broad a question to address, because in some cases, genetic modification methods are adding nutrients, but I still am very concerned about it. I mean, I think we need to go back to Mother Nature. We need to rehabilitate the soil. We need to support the regenerative agriculture movement. I mean, a lot of people don't know. There's another diagram picture really in our book, and I'd like to explain it to you verbally for your listeners. A lot of people don't know how we get our vitamins and minerals. So it all begins in the soil, and people have said for decades, the health of a nation is in the soil. The topsoil is so precious. We have half a chapter on the soil microbiome. People are always talking about our gut microbiomes, very important, but it all begins in our soil microbiome. So here's a quick summary. The soil should have enough minerals, in addition to all the fungi, etc., that feed it and so forth, that plants absorb roughly 15 minerals from the soil. And they do lots of things with those minerals. But one of the things they do that you and I cannot do is they manufacture vitamins. So they take those roughly 15 minerals, they synthesize roughly 15 vitamins. We come along, and if the minerals were there and if the vitamins have been manufactured, that's how we get roughly 15 vitamins and 15 minerals. Or those of us who are not vegan eat the animals that came along and ate those crops and weren't given a whole bunch of chemicals, right? That's how we get roughly 15 vitamins or minerals. And it all begins in the soil. And then our smart little brains, again, smarter than you and me, our brains know how to turn those vitamins and minerals into things like serotonin and dopamine and all the neurotransmitters and all the metabolites and all the ATP for the mitochondria, etc. Our bodies and brains know how to do that. But we can't go and eat serotonin. We can't go and eat ATP, which is the energy molecule. We have to eat the building blocks, put them into our bloodstream, and that's how we get all those things.
And without all of those neurotransmitters, that's where the mental health issues come in. I think maybe people don't understand that that's really where the problem is. If you're depressed or you're anxious, or even when later on, if it becomes to dementia, it's because we're missing those things that help our brains fire properly and do what they need to do. Bonnie, this has been amazing and so informative, and I so much appreciate your time and your knowledge. Please tell people a little bit about your book, where they can get it. I'm hoping it's everywhere.
I think it's everywhere. It's sold very well in the first year in the hardback, so the publisher, HarperCollins, decided it was worth putting out the paperback. So it's much cheaper now, which is good to know. But the single thing that I like to leave people with is my website, because it immediately opens to the book and tons and tons of resources and videos and all kinds of stuff. And so it's important to know my website. And there are too many Bonnie Kaplans in the world, so I had to use my middle initial. So it's Bonnie J. Kaplan, BonnieJKaplan.com. So BonnieJKaplan.com, and that takes you to everything, including a tab that says contact, and you can email me if you have a question.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. How generous of you to allow people to contact you directly. I very much appreciate your time and your knowledge. And thank you again, Dr. Bonnie J. Kaplan, for spending time with us here on Brain Health Matters. I'm Kate Kunkel. Take care. I'll see you next week.
You have 86 billion reasons to go vegan, and they're all resting right between your ears. That's right, 86 billion neurons that make up the master controller we call our brains. And while they're in control, our lifestyle choices determine how well they work, and that means we must nurture and protect them. The best way to do that? With a whole foods vegan diet that nurtures not just the physical, but also the emotional, mental, and spiritual brain. In the vegan brain, you'll learn how whole plant foods can nurture the healthiest version of yourself, and, perhaps more importantly, how your choices can reduce suffering for countless animals and help create a more compassionate, sustainable world. The Vegan Brain Second Edition also includes nutritious recipes and meal plans so that your journey towards a kinder, healthier future will be easy and delicious. Available in ebook format on Amazon.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Brain Health Matters. Be sure to subscribe with your favorite podcast service so that you can get all the latest episodes when they're released.